The dashcam first caught the figure standing alone in the road, thin as a branch and still as stone, as if waiting for the headlights to reach it. But the moment the beams touched the shape, the frame stuttered, freezing for a heartbeat before jumping forward, leaving only a trembling smear of darkness behind. If nothing was there anymore, then what scraped against the back of the car like nails on metal? And if no one else was around, why did the timestamp skip, as though something had blocked the lens? The road stretched empty and quiet, yet something matched every mile I drove, staying just far enough to remain unseen but close enough for the air to feel wrong. When I finally stopped, the silence thickened until a soft click came from the trunk. Small, careful, almost polite, like whatever had followed me had only now found the courage to move closer. Stepping out of the car made the night feel heavier, as if the air itself shifted to make room for me. The parking lot should have felt open, but something about the stillness made every direction feel sealed off. The dashcam light blinked behind me, pointed toward the road like it was waiting for something to return. I tried to convince myself the sound from the trunk was only cooling metal, yet the rhythm was too steady, too slow, too patient. Each soft tap felt aimed at me. I sensed something hovering just behind my shoulder, not close enough to touch, but close enough to sense, like breath that didn't belong to any person. When a faint knock echoed across the roof, careful and deliberate, the silence afterward felt like whatever made it was waiting to see how I would react. The tapping faded into a dragging sound that slid from one end of the roof to the other, slow and searching, as though learning the car's shape by touch. I leaned toward the window to catch a reflection, but the glass showed only a warped smear that shifted when I focused on it. A cold draft brushed past me, carrying the smell of damp soil, the kind you'd expect deep underground instead of on open pavement. It lifted the hair on my arms and moved with intention rather than wind. I called out, hoping the empty lot would swallow the sound, but a soft shuffle answered from behind the trunk. It didn't hurry, didn't hide, simply moved with quiet certainty, and the moment I heard it, the night around me felt tighter, like something had stepped closer the instant I spoke. I moved toward the trunk slowly, each step louder than the last, echoing across the empty lot like a warning I didn't want to understand. The shadows around the back of the car seemed denser, piling together in shapes that didn't match the objects casting them. My breath felt too loud, too warm against air that had turned cold enough to sting. The shuffling behind the trunk stopped the moment I neared it, leaving only the sound of my heartbeat and the faint creak of cooling metal. Something waited on the other side of that corner. I could feel the weight of its attention, steady and unblinking. When I reached out, my fingers trembled before they touched the surface, and the car vibrated with a small, quick thump, as if something inside or behind it reacted first. The thump faded, replaced by a low scrape that came from beneath the car, slow enough that I could follow its path from one side to the other. I crouched, trying to peer underneath, but the darkness there felt thicker than it should, swallowing the weak pool of light cast by the street lamp. The scrape stopped halfway, leaving a pause that felt intentional, and then something shifted the gravel right beside my foot. I stumbled back, pulse hammering, the lot suddenly too open yet too trapping at the same time. A faint outline rose behind the car, taller than before, as though stretching after a long crawl. The silence felt brittle, ready to crack, and when the dash cam blinked twice on its own, a single question pressed into my mind with cold certainty. How long had it been following me before I ever noticed? The night didn't settle after the thing rose behind the trunk. Instead, everything around me felt stretched, as if the parking lot had grown wider and emptier while I wasn't looking. I stepped back toward the driver's door, but each footfall landed too loudly, echoing across the pavement in strange, uneven patterns. The dashcam blinked again, twice in quick succession, as though signaling some silent warning I couldn't decipher. I tried to keep my eyes on the car, yet the sense of movement around me grew stronger, like something pacing just outside the reach of the street lamp's tired glow. Every shadow felt taller. Every corner felt narrower. When a soft scrape circled behind me, drifting in a slow half-loop before stopping directly at my back, it felt less like a sound and more like breath, brushing against the boundary of my fear. I forced myself into the car and slammed the door, but the moment the latch clicked shut, the interior felt like a sealed box, trapping all the wrong air. The dashcam display flickered, shifting between normal recording and faint distortion, the kind that rippled like heat around something that shouldn't be warm. The windows reflected pieces of the lot. A crooked lamppost, a patch of fog, the dark stretch of asphalt. Yet every reflection felt slightly delayed, like the car was remembering them instead of showing them. When I reached for the ignition, I hesitated, unsure if driving away would help or only invite it to follow again. A quiet knock tapped against the back window, gentle but unmistakable, and the dashcam responded with another brief pulse of static, as if reacting to something directly behind the glass. I turned the key. The engine struggled for a moment, coughing into life as though the cold had seeped deeper than just the night air. Headlights cut across the empty lot, stretching shadows that moved a fraction too late, following after their owners as if reluctant. As I shifted into reverse, the backup camera displayed more static than image, but in the brief clear flashes I saw something tall and thin leaning closer to the bumper. My breath caught, and I kept glancing between mirrors, half expecting the thing to appear, pressed against the glass. When I eased the car backward, a long shape slid out of view, not stepping aside, but lowering itself, as though melting into the darkness below. The moment I shifted into drive, the sense of having run over something soft but firm pulled through the wheels. Even though the road looked completely empty, the wheels rolled smoothly again, but the feeling of crossing over something clung to me, lingering like a phantom pressure. I guided the car toward the lot exit, hands tight on the wheel, trying to keep every movement steady. The road beyond looked darker than before, swallowing the edges of the street like a tunnel with no clear end. A faint flicker pulsed in the rearview mirror, not from the car, but from something moving behind it, too tall to be a shadow and too still to be a person. As I merged onto the empty stretch of road, the lines on the pavement seemed to bend slightly, as if the world was leaning away from whatever followed me. When the first soft tap struck the roof again, this time from above the driver's seat, I felt the weight of something settling into a position it had been waiting for. The tapping grew into a soft, dragging sound overhead, like fingertips tracing the car's shape from above. I didn't dare stop now. The road stretched ahead, a dark ribbon the headlights barely held together, yet I could feel the weight on the roof shifting with every turn. The dashcam picked up faint movements, small dips in the shadows, ripples that didn't match the car's motion, as if something outside was adjusting itself to stay directly above me. A low vibration hummed through the ceiling, spreading down into the steering column, making the wheel tremble in my hands. I pressed harder on the gas, hoping speed would shake it off, but the sound only grew steadier, more certain, until it felt like the thing had lowered its head against the metal, listening to my breath through the thin barrier between us. Kuwait. The road ahead narrowed into darkness thick enough to feel against my skin, and every mile I drove made the weight on the roof shift in slow, thoughtful movements. The sound of it adjusting, inch by inch, blended with the dull hum of the engine until I could no longer separate the two. The streetlights became fewer, their glow dimming into pale circles, swallowed almost instantly by the night. I tried not to look in the mirror, but the urge pulled at me until I finally glanced up and saw only the back window trembling with faint vibrations, as though something above it breathed in long stretches. The dashcam flickered again, and for a moment the screen warped into a stretched silhouette that matched the shape clinging above me. When the roof dipped slightly, the ceiling fabric brushed my hair, and I knew it had shifted closer than ever. I pressed harder on the gas, watching the speedometer climb, hoping motion alone could shake it loose. The wind roared against the car, but even with the rising speed, the weight overhead never slipped or faltered. Instead, it pressed down more firmly, as though adjusting to the motion with unsettling ease. The white lines on the road began to bend slightly in the corners of my vision, warping into thin, wavering strokes, like paint pulled by a trembling hand. The dashcam flickered from normal to static in rapid pulses, each glitch revealing a brief, distorted reflection of the tall form stretched across the roof. A sudden thump landed above my head, sharp and deliberate, and the car jolted sideways for a moment before steadying. My grip tightened, every part of me bracing for the next shift, the next sound, the next sign it was ready to move again. I couldn't keep driving forever. A gas station appeared ahead. Small, old, its single overhead lights flickering weakly. The place looked abandoned, yet it felt like my only chance to get even a moment away from the thing above me. As I slowed, the weight shifted sharply toward the rear, making the car's suspension dip with a low groan. The silence inside thickened until even my breath sounded uneven. I pulled into the lot and rolled to a stop beside a pump that looked like it hadn't been used in years. The overhead lights buzzed loudly, struggling to stay alive. The moment I cut the engine, the car settled with a faint creak, and the entire roof felt suddenly lighter, as though the thing had lifted itself just enough to prepare for another movement. I didn't dare open the door yet. The air felt too expectant, too ready. I waited, listening for the sound of movement above me, but the silence weighed heavier than any noise. It felt like the thing was waiting too, mirroring my hesitation. The lights around the station flickered in uneven intervals, stretching shadows across the ground that moved in ways the fixtures couldn't have caused. I reached slowly for the door handle, fingertips brushing the cold metal. The moment the latch clicked, a soft shift sounded from the far end of the roof. Not loud, but precise, like it wanted me to know it was following my every move. I opened the door just wide enough to slip out, and the cool air hit me with a sharp chill. I stayed close to the car, eyes fixed on the roofline, where a faint curve of motion hinted that the creature was crawling toward the opposite side, choosing its angle carefully. The quiet around the gas station deepened, settling into the kind of stillness that makes every small motion feel wrong. I circled slowly toward the front of the car, trying to keep the roof in sight without getting too close. Each step echoed softly, bouncing off the cracked pavement like distant footsteps. The thing above shifted again, its weight making the metal dip in smooth, controlled motions. I heard the faint scrape of limbs adjusting, dragging lightly as if mapping the car's every contour. When I reached the front bumper, the headlights reflected just enough to reveal a long shadow sliding down the side of the vehicle. It stretched thin and straight across the ground, far too tall to be mine. The shape paused, then bent slightly at the end, as though turning to look directly at me even before the creature itself moved. The shadow sliding along the pavement felt like a warning, but also an invitation, as though the creature wanted me to understand the shape of its presence. I stayed near the broken concrete divider, trying to keep distance without losing sight of the car. The gas station lights sputtered again, throwing thin sparks of brightness across the pumps before choking into dimness. Each flicker made the creature's shadow stretch and shrink like it breathed with the wiring overhead. The air felt colder now, not from the night, but from something that seemed to gather behind me, pressing lightly against my back like the start of a touch that never completed. I turned slowly, expecting the creature to be there, but only the empty lots stared back. The silence grew thick, too thick, until the faint creak of metal rolled across the roof of my car. Slow, careful, and close. The creak on the roof became a quiet shuffle, the kind that suggested the creature was deciding its next move. I stepped forward, each footfall landing softer than I intended, as though the ground itself was muffling my steps. The air carried a faint hum, almost electrical, pulsing in uneven intervals. It drifted from the direction of the pumps, bending the shadows in small waves. The creature's silhouette dipped briefly into view as I reached the hood of the car, its long limbs lowering in a slow, testing descent toward the passenger side. I held my breath, afraid even a single exhale would draw its attention faster. The gas station sign above buzzed loudly, throwing off a harsh stutter of light that made the creature's body gleam for one unsettling moment before darkness pulled it back into shape. I backed away from the car, trying to create distance, but the creature followed my motion without sound. It didn't hurry. It simply mirrored each retreat with a slow lean or shift of its limbs. The gas station felt smaller, as if the edges of the lot had crept inward, squeezing the space around us. A breeze swept across the cracked pavement, yet it carried no warmth, just a faint odor of damp stone, like a deep cave breathing out. The creature lowered itself closer to the ground, its long arms bending in angles that didn't match anything natural. The moment I reached the edge of the pump island, the lights above blinked in rapid succession, and for a split second, the creature vanished entirely. When the light steadied again, it was standing much closer, its smooth face tilted slightly, as though studying the rhythm of my fear. I felt the instinct to run, but the open road behind me looked darker than ever, a long ribbon of emptiness that seemed ready to swallow sound, light, and movement. The creature shifted once more, rising to its full height, with a quiet unfolding motion that made the air change pressure around us. Its limbs straightened slowly, stretching until the shadow it cast grew longer than the car itself. I stepped backward toward the station building, drawn by the idea of a wall at my back. Anything to stop the feeling of being surrounded. The creature followed, but not directly. It angled its body slightly, skirting the edge of the pump island, as though it wanted to approach from a direction I couldn't watch properly. When it paused, the shadows beneath it gathered in a shape that didn't match its body, expanding outward like a pulse. I reached the wall and pressed my back against it, feeling its rough surface push cold through my hoodie. The creature stopped a few feet away, balancing on its long limbs with a stillness that felt intentional, as though it waited for something specific to happen next. The buzzing lights overhead dimmed once more, and for a moment, only the faint hum from the old sign filled the air. Then the creature leaned forward, its body bending in a slow arc, lowering itself until its blank face hovered just above the pavement. It stayed like that, motionless, as if listening closely to something I couldn't hear. The silence deepened, tightening around my chest. When the creature finally dragged one long limb forward, the sound it made was soft but sharp, like a whisper cut through stone. And it was the closest it had ever been. The creature stayed crouched before me, its blank face angled downward as if listening to something only it understood. I kept my back pressed to the wall, feeling each beat of my heart echo through my ribs in uneven bursts. The air between us seemed to thicken, carrying a strange hum that vibrated lightly against my chest. When the creature shifted its weight, the movement felt too smooth, as though its bones bent in slow, liquid curves. I inched sideways along the wall, never letting my eyes leave it, but the creature mirrored me with a silent glide that made it feel less like it walked, and more like it slid through the space it occupied. The buzzing lights above flickered again, and just for a moment, the creature's limbs appeared stretched twice their length, reaching toward me like a shadow that had begun to forget its boundaries. The hum in the air grew stronger, pulsing in slow waves that made the streetlight glow throb faintly. I felt the vibration move up the wall behind me, like something was traveling through the bricks. The creature lifted its head a few inches, revealing nothing on its face but smooth stillness. Yet the motion suggested attention. Focused, intense, unbroken. When I took a careful breath, the creature leaned subtly forward, responding to the sound as though breath itself had meaning. When I forced myself to move again, sliding toward the edge of the building where the darkness beyond the light pressed in like a waiting mouth. The creature followed at the same pace, neither rushing nor hesitating. Its limbs remained low, but each step bent at angles that felt deliberate, almost curious, as if studying every small choice I made. I reached the corner and paused, feeling the cold night spill around me from two directions at once. The open lot behind the building looked even darker than the road, stretching into a patch of nothingness that swallowed the edges of sight. The creature stopped inches from the corner, as though the shift in environment had given it something new to examine. It extended one long limb toward the ground, dragging its fingers lightly across the concrete. The sound that followed wasn't a scrape, but a soft vibration, like a resonant hum that rolled through the ground and into my feet. The air thickened again, and the faint pressure in my ears made everything else fall quiet. The creature turned its blank face upward, and the sudden stillness told me it sensed something not around us, but beneath us. The vibration beneath my shoes grew more distinct, like a distant engine running far underground. The creature responded immediately, tilting its body toward the back lot with slow, deliberate interest. Its limbs pressed flat to the ground for a moment, as though feeling for direction. I stepped away from the wall, unsure whether distance from the building would help, or only bring me closer to whatever was stirring under the concrete. The creature's head rotated slightly, not a full turn, just enough to feel wrong, before it began moving toward the empty lot. I felt a pull, subtle at first, urging me to follow. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was dread, or maybe the vibrations themselves had a way of drawing the body forward. Either way, the space between us narrowed without my permission. The creature slid farther into the open lot, moving with a smoothness that made the darkness seem to part for it. I followed at a distance I hoped was safe, though the boundary between safe and foolish had blurred long ago. The vibrations grew steadier, forming a quiet rhythm that moved through the ground like a heartbeat too large to belong to anything I understood. The creature stopped suddenly, standing tall, limbs stretched in a slow upward curve, as though listening with its entire body. The air shifted again, cooler and heavier, and I felt the certainty that whatever waited beneath the surface was rising. The creature leaned forward in a single fluid motion, and its shadow stretched toward me across the lot. For a moment, I wasn't sure whether the shadow moved because of the lights, or because something deeper had finally answered. The creature's shadow stretched across the cracked pavement like a thread being pulled too far, thinning as it moved yet never breaking. I watched the center of the lot where it stood, its body raised slightly, as if the vibrations beneath us guided every subtle tilt. The hum from the ground became steadier, almost patterned, building into a rhythm I felt in my knees before I heard it in my ears. The night around us deepened, swallowing the edges of the station building and blurring the distance with a haze that hadn't been there minutes ago. Each breath I took felt heavier, as though the air thickened with something invisible drifting upward from below. The creature lowered its limbs again, but this time the motion felt purposeful, like it was preparing, not to move toward me, but to meet something rising from underneath. My pulse quickened, matching the rhythm like an unwilling echo. The ground shifted, not enough to break the pavement, but enough to feel like the world beneath my shoes exhaled. A small tremor traveled outward from the creature's feet, radiating in a slow ripple that made loose gravel bounce softly against one another. I stepped back instinctively, my legs stiffening as adrenaline pulled tight across my chest. The creature responded instantly, rising into a tall, poised arc that made its limbs look impossibly elongated. The hum beneath us grew louder, deep enough to rattle the metal frame of the gas station sign behind me. I pressed my hand against the nearest wall to steady myself, but even the bricks vibrated with the same strange pulse. The creature turned its blank face toward me, not in threat, but in a way that felt like warning, as though it understood what was coming before I ever could. The vibrations changed again, turning sharp, quick, almost like knocking from deep beneath the concrete. Each strike echoed faintly upward, creating tiny shivers in the air around my knees. The creature adjusted its posture, lowering itself into a stance that seemed both defensive and anticipatory. The lot darkened further, the moonlight draining from the edges first, as if the shadows themselves were crawling inward. I tried to move toward the car, thinking its thin metal frame might be safer than open pavement. But before I could take more than 2 steps, the ground beneath the creature cracked in a thin, branching line. A deep thud rose from below, vibrating through my ribs. The creature's limbs tightened, curling inward, and its blank face angled directly at the widening fissure, as though recognizing something I couldn't yet see. A hollow groan rose from beneath the pavement, longer and deeper than the earlier vibrations, sounding almost like air being pulled through a narrow passage. The crack widened another inch, and a rush of cold air spilled upward, colder than anything the night had offered so far. I froze mid-step, the chill wrapping around my legs as if gripping them. The creature reacted instantly, its limbs snapping outward in a protective arc that framed the fissure. For a moment, it seemed to shield the ground below rather than threaten me. The hum vanished, replaced by a slow dragging sound from deep beneath us, like something enormous shifting its weight. The creature extended one long limb toward the cracked pavement, pressing its hand flat against it. The moment its palm touched the surface, the dragging stopped, cut short mid-motion, as though responding to the creature's command or presence. The silence that followed was wrong, too sudden, too complete, as if every sound had been swallowed by the crack the moment the creature touched it. My breath felt loud, almost intrusive against the stillness. The creature remained poised, one limb pressed flat to the ground, its entire frame rigid. The shadows around us halted, no longer shifting or bending. Even the weak station lights behind me seemed frozen, their usual flicker suspended in place. Then, slowly, the creature lifted its hand, the glossy skin reflecting a faint shimmer from the moon. The crack didn't widen further, but something deep within it pulsed once, just enough to send a ripple through the air. The creature tilted its head sharply, as though listening to the fading echo. When its limbs lowered again, I sensed the shift immediately. The threat below had quieted, but the creature itself had become more focused, as if something had changed in its purpose. The faint pulse from the crack faded slowly, leaving the air strangely hollow, as though something beneath had given up or withdrawn. The creature held its poised stance a moment longer before straightening, its limbs rising in one unbroken sweep that made its shadow stretch across the lot. I stayed frozen, unsure whether to move or wait. The quiet so heavy it felt like anything I did might break it in the wrong direction. The gas station lights flickered back to life, weak and uncertain, but enough to paint the creature's form in cold highlights. It angled its blank face toward me, not threateningly, but with a kind of eerie recognition, as if the moment beneath the pavement had connected us. The wind shifted lightly, brushing against my hoodie, and for the first time since this started, I sensed the creature was no longer focused on the ground, but on me. The creature took a single step toward me, slow enough for the air to shift around its limbs, but deliberate enough to make my pulse jump. Its movements no longer felt predatory. They carried weight, like it approached with purpose rather than hunger. I backed up instinctively until my shoulders met the cold wall again, the rough surface biting through the fabric of my hoodie. The creature paused a few feet away, lowering itself just slightly, its limbs folding in a soft, fluid arc. It felt like waiting, like expecting something from me, but I had nothing to offer except the trembling breath pushing from my chest. The night around us quieted even further, the hum in my ears fading until only the faint buzz of the sign remained. Whatever connection existed now didn't feel like threat or safety. It felt like the beginning of something I couldn't name. The creature's head tilted in a subtle motion, and a soft vibration rolled through the air. Gentler than before, barely strong enough to stir dust near its feet. It felt almost like a question, though no sound accompanied it. I lifted my hand slightly, unsure why, maybe to show I wasn't about to run. The creature reacted instantly, leaning forward with sharp curiosity, its limbs angling inward, as if studying even the smallest gesture. The crack in the ground behind it remained still, no more pulses rising from below, but the memory of what stirred there made my stomach tighten. For a moment, the creature and I held still in a strange, silent exchange. The tension that had once felt like danger now settled into something more complex, an awareness that whatever followed me wasn't finished, even if the thing beneath the surface had quieted. The creature shifted again, rising just enough to give its limbs more reach, though it did not close the distance. Instead, It turned its face toward the road beyond the gas station. The road I had come from. The route where the first scrape against my car began. The quiet deepened as it angled its body toward the open stretch of darkness, its posture long and attentive. A cold realization settled through me. It wasn't finished following. Maybe it had been drawn here because of whatever waited beneath the lot, but that connection felt secondary now. When the creature looked back at me, the emptiness of its face somehow carried intention. Then it stepped backward, each motion smooth, gliding toward the center of the road. The night pulled around it like a slow tide, as though the darkness recognized its presence. The creature reached the middle of the road and stopped, its limbs lowering in a slow, deliberate motion. The shadows surrounding it deepened, gathering at its feet like ink spreading from an unseen source. I stood rooted to the pavement, torn between relief and dread, watching as the creature slowly rotated its face toward me. One final time, a faint vibration drifted across the air. Nothing threatening, just enough to press lightly against my chest, like a sound too low to hear, but too real to ignore. Then, the creature turned away completely and began moving down the road, gliding more than walking, its tall frame folding slightly with each step until the darkness swallowed it whole. The night fell silent again, leaving me alone with the fading echo of its presence and the uneasy certainty that if I ever drove that road again, it would know.